Hi, Brenda. Hi, everyone. I am Shake Silikian with Shake Silikian Consulting. So excited to have you joining for my October live conversation. I'm really thrilled to have Brenda Meller here with me today. We'll be talking about tips and strategies for optimizing your LinkedIn profile. And Brenda, today is my 13th live conversation. I started this a year ago with a mutual friend of ours who was the introduction between us. So Diane Darling, it
Oh
was my
yeah.
first conversation, and we talked about networking a year ago on Halloween. And so I'm so excited to have you as my guest. I've learned so much from our interactions and our conversations and participating in your program, The Recipe. So I am thrilled that our audience today will also get some of your wisdom. Before we jump in, I did want to say we are live and this will be available as a recording on the three different platforms that I use, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. If you need to leave or watch it at a later time, still let us know where you are joining from or watching the replay from. We love seeing who you are and what audiences we're reaching. There is a slight delay. It's about a 20-second delay. We are using Restream to stream this on the three different platforms. That said, I'd love to know where you're joining us live from. So put it in chat, say hello, whether it's from your living room in Nebraska, or you are in the San Francisco Bay Area or the Detroit, Michigan area, wherever you are. We'd love to know um, who's with us today. So with that, with the logistics out of the way, I just wanted to say hello again, Brenda. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, Shake, thank you so much for having me. We were planning on doing this last week, and unfortunately, the technology was not cooperating. It was the Amazon web hiccup or whatever you want to call it that was happening, and it was affecting everything, including Restream. So I'm really glad that we were able to move it this week, and looking forward to having the chat with you today.
Great. And I want to welcome, the chat is super active. Dr. Brian Grossman said the best conversation. So thrilled to see so many people joining us from the Bay Area, from Boston, from Henderson, Nevada, so Maryland, Pennsylvania. Thrilled to have everybody with us. Brenda, let's start with the basics. I'd love to do a rapid round addressing different
Sure.
parts of the profile on LinkedIn. What is the most critical elements of the first impression on a LinkedIn profile? What should people make sure they have before they get too far into the process?
Well, actually, what they should make sure that they have is a clear idea of who they're trying to reach through their LinkedIn profile. And I'm a corporate marketer, a former corporate marketer, I should say, that's converted into a LinkedIn coach and marketing consultant. And I always approach this question, there's not like one thing that you should do, but I think overall you should have a strategy going in, and that includes understanding who is your ideal target audience. Someone who may be working but looking for a new job, their target audience is recruiters and hiring managers, but at the same time, they don't want to set off any red flags. So they really should be writing their profile for the perspective of their coworkers, their team members, their leaders, as opposed to someone who's self-employed. Your ideal target audience is probably the person that you're hoping to do business with, your clients, your prospective clients, or maybe even your referral partners. So there's not a one size fits all approach to having the best LinkedIn profile. I want you to almost think about your LinkedIn profile is a landing page for you that's going to help you to connect with your ideal target audience and to meet your career or your business goals.
I love that. Definitely hear your marketer coming out in that, right? Identifying who are you targeting. Um, let's get a little more practical though, in terms of the headline section. What is your recommendation for that? As a consultant and in my role as a senior advisor, I do notice that some people customize that, others leave that the generic, LinkedIn gray background. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Are you referring to the banner, the graphic that sits behind you or the
Yes,
headline? Okay,
yes.
I thought I heard you say header, but I think in my
Okay.
head, as soon as you started talking, I'm like, I think I missed what you were saying. So, yeah, in terms of the banner, I want you to think about that banner as like a billboard on the high side of the highway that's promoting you to your ideal target audience. And you shouldn't have just that gray green default. You should have something. And at bare minimum, if you go into and edit that, LinkedIn has a header image library. They're all kind of generic. There's one that looks like a desk, and there's one with a fancy latte art, and there's like, some flowers and things like that as well. Pick something. Something is better than nothing that's in there. Even better, though, would be to pick a header image that's branded for your organization if you're an employee of an organization, or to create a custom header if you're self employed that's helping to promote your business. And my go-to resource for this, Shake, is canva.com. And they actually have a header image library in there, and you can pick things, you can change the colors, change the fonts, add in your brand tagline. But definitely having something in there is better than having nothing. And having, even one of the LinkedIn headers that they provide in the header image library, that's better than nothing in there as well.
Thank you. And then I'll now say the headline, right? The
Yeah.
section under our names that gives us the who we are. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah. I like to think about the headline is something that follows you around on LinkedIn. And the easiest way for you to kind of see what I'm talking about is if you're on your profile, scroll down to your activity and at the bottom where it says like show all posts or show all activity. And that way you can see your recent posts or your places where you recently commented. And you're going to notice that when you post or when you comment, we see your shot photo, we see your name, and we see a portion of your headline. It's usually between 40 to 80 characters, depending on if the person's viewing it from mobile or desktop. So while LinkedIn gives you 220 characters for that full headline field, I think the most important are what appears in that previewable area in the first 40 to 80. And I like to think about it's better to say LinkedIn, LinkedIn coach serving the self-employed, corporate teams and executives starting off, as opposed to chief engagement officer at Meller Marketing using the job title at company, which is the LinkedIn default. I feel like you're missing out on opportunities for that. Instead, I recommend that your headline be a headline promoting you to your ideal target audience and written in a way that's interesting and it's compelling. It like gets them to want to click and go, "Oh, I need to talk to that person," or "I want to learn more about them." Because if we can get them to click to come back to our profile, then they're more open and receptive to that landing page that we talked about earlier. Promoting your business, telling them about your business, and giving them a path to do business with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know we have a few more people who've joined us from downtown LA in California, Marion, Ohio. Welcome. Thrilled to have you joining us. Um, we will get to audience questions as well, so please feel free to add questions throughout this conversation. We'll keep an eye on the chat. But I did want to jump to the about section,
Sure.
Brenda. I've noticed a lot of people copy and paste their resume there. What are your recommendations for that section?
Yeah, typically there's some guidelines I like to give people for the about section. The first is write it in the first person. So if I were meeting you at an in-person event, how would you introduce yourself? Whereas the resume is like a third person, meaning like it might say results-oriented marketer with 20 plus years experience across marketing industries, including X, Y, and Z. So it's more of an accomplishment-based statement that third person. Now, if I met you at an event, Chucky, I wouldn't hold my hand out and say, "Hi, I'm Brenda Meller, results-oriented marketer with 20 plus." Like I wouldn't say that to you. Instead, what would I say? How would I describe myself to you? Or if that point in the conversation, if you said, "Tell me about yourself," like what would you say about yourself in there? So think about the first paragraph, especially in your about section, that really should be your elevator pitch for your ideal target audience. And if your audience walks away with nothing else from today, I want them to remember this. Your about statement is not really about you. It's about you as it relates to how can you help your ideal target audience, or how can you help that employer if you might be job seeking, or how do you help your current employer if you're working for a company. So again, your about is not about you. Your about is really about how you can connect with and help your ideal target audience.
That's brilliant. And yes, that would be an amazing takeaway. But I think there's a lot you've already shared. Um, in looking through the profile, the next section is the experience section.
Mhm.
I have some perspectives on that from the executive search perspective in terms of how much detail and what people should be putting in there from, again, just the executive recruiting perspective. What are your thoughts before I share what I'm noticing and what I would recommend?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm going to start with, since you're talking about executive recruiting, I think from a job seeker perspective, I do see a lot of people copying and pasting from their resume. They put like everything that they have in their resume in each of their experiences. I think that's a mistake, because I like to think about your LinkedIn as like an appetizer. You got want to give them a little taste of you, but your goal is to have that hiring manager or executive recruiter reach out to you and say, "Can you send us your resume?" Like, we really want to pique their curiosity and have them reach out to us. Now, for people who are self-employed, I think you should use your experience section, especially for your business, to describe your role, to describe your company, your products and services, and also to give them a path for doing business with you. And I like to do like a passive and an active call to action in there. A passive is more like a how sending them to a website where they can research more about you before reaching out. And active is, if I'm ready to do business with you, I want to get a hold of you now. So that should either be like an email or a phone number. So let's not create hurdles for people. Let's make it as easy as possible and create that path for doing business with us. But I'm curious what your perspectives are on that.
Yeah, from the executive search perspective, I do think people should have some information in there. Our team likes to say your resume is your impact report. In the nonprofit sector, we use a lot of impact reports and case statements in fundraising and the work. I think sometimes marketers use those terminologies as well. So I think there should be some information about what has been your impact. Not every detail of every single day, but should have some of that information. I also think your resume and your LinkedIn profile has to match. It is an absolute red flag when dates don't match, or whether or not you're employed doesn't match. And I realize there are some nuances to this, but I do find that that tends to be a red flag for me personally.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think sometimes I see people, if you work as a contract employee, for example, a couple years back, my husband he worked for Oakland Community College, but he was a contract employee through Kelly Services. So sometimes people are like, well, do I list Kelly Services as my employer? Because that's where I get my paycheck from. Or do I list Oakland Community College, which is, where I actually worked, where I was stationed on there. I usually say, and I'm curious what your thoughts are too. I usually say put Oakland Community College, but then in the description section, you might want to spell out, I'm a contract employee of Oakland Community College through Kelly Services. Is that what you would recommend as well, or how would you handle that?
I think so. I think as long as it's clear what the job was. I mean, if you're at on site at a college, you're not providing the service to Kelly Services. It's a through.
Exactly.
It's a matching.
You're
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
contracted through that, but yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
But that sometimes having when you talk about that inconsistency, because on a job application, they're going to list all your employers, and that's a legally binding document. So you might need to say, tell that hiring manager or recruiter, hey, on the application, I'm listing it as Kelly Services because that's actually where my paycheck is coming from. But you're going to notice both on my resume and my LinkedIn that it says Oakland Community College, which is where I was placed and where I'm actually doing my day-to-day job duties, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And I think there are opportunities to explain those. pieces. I find sometimes people left a job a long time ago and they don't update their LinkedIn, and it
Yeah.
says current. And I personally think LinkedIn, whether you're employed by an organization, an employee, or a contractor, is a much more powerful tool than I'm in a job search and I'm going to look for my next job. Um,
Yeah.
in the interest of time, I did want to lump the education licenses and certifications and volunteer
Mhm.
sections together, because we do have a couple of questions that have come up already.
Okay.
Any tips on those sections? How much, how little should be there?
So you said education, license, and certifications, and what was the one underneath that?
Volunteers, volunteering.
Volunteers. So,
Yeah.
I think generally speaking, for all of those sections, I think you want to think about putting information in there that helps to support your current and future career goals or your current and future business goals. So education, I think put in what you've completed, or even if you've completed coursework at the bachelor's level or master's level, put that in there. Even if you haven't completed a degree, I think you could still list it in there. I see some people, especially those that are experience rich, that are now starting to pull dates out of there. And I've heard some pros and cons with that. Not having dates might exclude you from coming up in searches by recruiters if they're looking for someone who has a bachelor's degree, for example. The flip side of that is that, age discrimination is a thing. And, I hear a lot of especially those experienced rich candidates saying, well, I don't want to be excluded for being of a certain age in there. So not having the dates, so like at least get me into consideration. Let's get a conversation started inside there. Regarding licenses and certifications and volunteer work, again, include it, keep it in if it's still relevant to your career and your business goals. For example, I'm working with a client right now who is now self-employed, having left corporate. When she was in corporate, she had certifications that were like IT and cybersecurity, and she's no longer doing that line for her business. So I said, you can leave it in. It's completely up to you. But if I were you, I would say less is more, and especially if they're no longer relevant. If a client were to look at that and go, "What does that have to do with this service?" Like, if it doesn't
Mhm.
make sense in there, it could give them the impression, your prospective clients, the impression that you're keeping one foot in the door for being an employee and you're not, fully in on this business yet. Alternatively, it could create some confusion in there. And then regarding volunteer, I think include it if it's relevant to you, your career, your business goals. Exclude it if it doesn't. And if it's a past volunteer role, but it still demonstrates your values and your commitment to a certain type of industry or causes or community organizations. I think that's a great thing to see. I believe all of us should be doing some type of volunteer work or giving back. Imagine what a wonderful world it would be if we all were doing something to help others that are less fortunate, or our favorite nonprofit or community organizations. I think it's a great thing. But in terms of priority, I don't think these are the biggest things that are going to make the biggest impact on you coming up in searches by more of your target audience. I think these are more nuances as people start to read through your profile, but we can certainly, help to dial those up a little bit.
Right. Do you find the skills section relevant still?
I still think that the skills are used as SEO, search engine optimization. So having the right skills in there that line up with your business and your career goals, I think is a good thing. I will periodically, I'll do this for myself or recommend this for my clients as well. Like just do a once over on your skills list. Take anything out that's not relevant. And then maybe think about even looking up some of your competitors or other people and looking at those skills and how they line up. And maybe there might be some gaps, some new skills that you've added into the section. I'll be honest, Oshake, the most important thing I think about skills is what are the things that are visible. So in your skill section, you can now have up to 100 skills, but the only thing you'll see are the top two. Most people won't click
Mhm.
on show more skills. So I think about what's in that previewable area. Are those skills aligning with your business and career goals? Similarly, in your about section at the bottom, we can now add our top 5 skills. So look at those, and those are really visible because those are more towards the top side of your profile where they're more likely to be seen. So are those the right 5 skills that illustrate your expertise, what you do for a living, or how you're providing expertise or services to your clients? And as LinkedIn members, we can also endorse people for skills. So this is a really great way of just getting some conversations started. Someone might be watching this interview today, whether live or in playback, and they might go, wow, Shake is a really great interviewer. And they might find a skill on your profile for interviewing, for example, or podcasting or something like that. And giving you an endorsement for that, you'll then get a notification from LinkedIn saying, Brian Grossman endorsed you for interviewing skills, for example. And you might go, oh, that was nice of Brian. And then you might send a note back to him. And it's a good conversation starter for those types of things. Sometimes they don't, they might just like it or things like that. But I think it can provide us a path to getting some of those conversations started too.
Wonderful. So speaking of Brian, Brian has a couple of questions in the chat. I wanted to show his question. The first one asked, can we merge two expertise in one banner? What are your thoughts on that?
So Brian, first of all, you can do anything that you want. I'm not the boss of you, but if you're asking me as a LinkedIn coach and as a marketing consultant, I think you want to be very crystal clear to your ideal target audience exactly what it is that you do. And I would say like sales and marketing are kind of similar. Sales and emotional mastery, they feel so different to me. So if there's a way that you can bring those together and make them fit, maybe it's the path to sales excellence is emotional mastery, for example. Like that might be something like, oh, I never thought about it that way. If you can connect the dots with the two, if it makes sense, I think you can, but I don't think you want to have left side banner be sales and right side be emotional mastery. Now, having said that, there is a new feature that if you are a premium business member or above, so a paid member of LinkedIn, premium business sales navigator, any of those things, you can have multiple banners in there and they rotate, I think, every 3 or 4 seconds. So you can actually have one banner that talks about sales and then the second banner that talks about emotional mastery. And you can have multiple banners, like even after that, you can have one that's focusing on public speaking. The challenge there, though, Brian, is these banners are rotating so quickly. And I've heard some people say I get dizzy looking at them because they're rotating so quickly. And most people don't know that you can click on it to stop the rotation from happening. So I wouldn't recommend that you have two different focuses. Instead, what I would do, Brian, is if you're going to focus on sales and emotional, was it emotional mastery? I can't think of the phrase
Yes.
in there now. I would say put one banner up for sales for a month and then the next month have a second banner up for emotional mastery. So keep them distinct in there, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ahead of this conversation, somebody had also asked me about recommendations. So I'd love for you, Brenda, before we jump to Brian's next question, talk about recommendations and how you use them, what you would recommend. I know for me, I don't think I do as good of a job highlighting those. I have a ton
Yeah.
of recommendations and fabulous things, but it's lovely if somebody scrolls all the way down and finds them, but are they helpful to have or not?
Yeah. So as a marketer, here's what I'm going to say to you, Shake. If you have recommendations on your profile, don't just rely on people scrolling to the bottom of your profile and finding them. Use those recommendations as social proof. You can sprinkle them on your website. You can put them in sales presentations or proposals or different places to help to merchandise your expertise and clients that have worked with you before. And you can also, grab a screen capture and do a LinkedIn post. Thanks, Brian Grossman, for your wonderful testimonial. It was a pleasure working with you as well. I'm glad my LinkedIn expertise has helped you in your business, grow, and I might tag his business in there as well. So what I like to think about is there's two categories, received and given. And when I'm working with a client, I like to look at, this is not like top priority, but as a LinkedIn coach, they're paying me money to help them with their LinkedIn. So I like to look at, do you have at least one recommendation in both categories in the current year? And as we're recording this interview, it's October 27th of 2025. So you should have at least one received and one given in 2025. Okay. The other thing I look at is, do you have more given than received? Because sometimes what I see happening is a person will have like 20 recommendations received and 0 given, right? And I think the message at a subliminal level is I am using LinkedIn for myself. I'm a taker. I'm not a giver, right? And I think there's something to be said with, I think it's actually easier to give a recommendation sometimes than it is to ask for one because it feels a little like icky and makes us a little bit squeamish on there. But for example, I could give you a recommendation, Shaka, and I probably will, on hosting me for this interview and making it such a seamless process. And that could be used to help to merchandise your future interviews and things like that in these series. So again, try to give more than you received. And when you have a client interaction, I just returned from a conference and I got really great feedback from attendees that were in the room and the person who booked me, etc. I'm definitely going to be reaching out. The conference is still going on right now, but after the conference is done, the dust has settled. I'm going to reach out and say, hey, loved hearing your feedback on that. Would you be open to giving me a LinkedIn recommendation? So start developing that sense of when somebody seems to be really happy with your services, a brand cheerleader, maybe they're even posting and they're talking about you on LinkedIn and other places. Strike while the iron's hot. Ask them for a LinkedIn recommendation. If you're not sure if they're going to say, yes, I'd be happy to do so, they're probably not the right person to ask. If I were to ask somebody like Brian for a recommendation, I know he would give me one, for example. And that's the type of thing that you should be doing. Just getting in the habit on a regular basis. Not everyone will say yes. Some of them will say yes and they'll forget to do it, and I might nudge them. And then I've even had clients before that they've said they want to, and then after I've nudged them a third time, and I'll say, would it be helpful for you if I wrote something for you and then you could work off of that? And they're like, oh yes, because that's what they're struggling with, is like the what do I say about you part of it. We're thinking it'd be easy for them, but sometimes writing it for them, it's almost like offering to write a letter of recommendation for someone as a starting point, and then they can kind of run with that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I haven't really thought in the past. I do a lot of thank you posts for people, but I don't necessarily write them as a recommendation. So that is an aha moment for me, right? When somebody has been a speaker, I'm on the board and do a lot of professional development through associations. So for the speakers, I'll write thank you posts and comment a few things. But after this, I'm going to go back and write recommendations for all of those people with the words that I've already used. So thank you for helping me rethink that. Brian had one more question about in healthcare and how do I share the impact. I love your humor, Brian, of saying you can't say 50% of lives saved. That's not a great stat to share. Yes, I think it's about the ratings, it's about the performance and the impact you're having with the organization. Why would somebody want to work with you, or what is the benefit, right? Why you, essentially, I think of that from the impact perspective. What were you able to accomplish in that particular role? And if you can't speak to that, then why did you do the position? Was it just collecting a paycheck, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't expect is the case at all. Brenda, we're coming up on our 30 minutes. It flies by way too quickly. I want to be a good steward of your time. Any final words of advice for folks before we wrap things up?
So as soon as this video is done playing on LinkedIn, there'll be a little share button at the bottom. It looks like a little paper airplane icon. I always recommend, if you haven't posted yet this week, this month, or even this year, this is the easiest thing to do. Just reshare this video out to people and maybe share with them why they should watch it, or maybe one or two takeaways from the video itself, and make sure that tag at Shake and at Brenda Meller, tag both of us in that as well. And we'll comment back for you. So my goal is always to help meet people where they are on LinkedIn and take them where they need to go, and to give you advice that's going to be actionable, that's going to help you right away. But don't make it too hard for yourself. There's always different techniques that you can do to make things easier for you. So don't overthink it, but just little efforts are going to make the biggest impact for you on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for your time. And again, I've learned so much from you over the last few years. I'm so thankful to Diane for initially introducing me to the work that you're doing. Where can people find you? And are you okay with people reaching out to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. If you are listening to this, whether it's on the show live or in playback, if you go to my profile, you're going to notice my default button is follow. If you want to connect with me, just click on the more button, and there's an option underneath that to personalize invite. And just mention that you saw me on the show with Shaka here. And in terms of like, if you want to learn more about the offerings I have, my LinkedIn one-to-one services, or even my free resources and checklists and things like that, you can go to mellermarketing.com. That's MELLER, mellermarketing.com to learn more.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. The questions, for the participation. We loved seeing the audience and hearing where people are joining us from. Thanks, Brenda, for
Oh,
always being so willing and open with the advice that you have from the perspective that you bring. Being an expert on LinkedIn and keeping track of what LinkedIn is doing and what is and isn't working. Many of us are not in a position to do that on a regular basis. I really hope we'll have an opportunity to connect again sometime in the future. Let me know if there are other topics that might be of interest to you. I love hosting these on a monthly basis based off of questions I'm getting from my network and connections. So thanks, Brenda. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you, Shaka. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care.